Can you help? Can you help me? Can you help? Self-Helpless! Can you help? Can you help me? Can you help? Self-Helpless! Can you help? Can you help me? Can you help? Self-Helpless!
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the Self-Helpless podcast. I'm Delaney Fisher.
And I'm Kelsey Cook.
And oh my gosh, we are digging into overthinking today.
Yeah.
It's a meaty one.
It is a meaty one. It's something we've definitely touched on before, and I feel like it's something that we always have more to say with it. And the older we get, the more experiences we have, it just feels like, oh man, there's so many things I wish I could tell younger me about tips for overthinking.
Exactly. I mean, I overthought this episode even, so I'm going to probably use that as an example. I'm like, yeah, it's a real meaty, you got a lot of stew to sift through in this episode for sure. But before we get into all of it, we're going to talk about, what is overthinking exactly, kind of the different ways we overthink, tips, examples, all of that. But Kels, where are you performing coming up?
Yeah, so I was just in Dania Beach, Florida over the weekend. So if we had Helpsters come out, thank you so much. And then, my fall is getting pretty crazy. So in September, I'm going to be in Fort Collins and Louisville. In October, I will be in Spokane and Cleveland. November, I will be in Grand Rapids, Washington, D.C., Nashville, Huntsville, and Atlanta. And then in December, I'm in Boston and in Tampa. So you can go to kelseycook.com and get some tour date tickets. I would love to see you guys on the road.
Nice. Very exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hey, and if you like podcasts, I got another podcast called Career Crush, totally free, available at my website, delaneyfisher.com. Just interviewed a few people. I'm having so much fun. I'm learning so much from my guests, things about myself that are kind of coming up that wouldn't have come up without these interviews. It's all very fun. Interviewed a writer who writes queer vampire romance novels. I mean,
Wow.
You can't get any more specific than that.
Yeah.
A whole series of them. Interviewed somebody who is a diversity, equity, and inclusion expert, has a consultancy, and really opens up about what it's like having emotional labor as part of your day-to-day. Super fascinating. Learned so much there.
Yeah.
We're just having a blast. I'm doing some solo episodes, the kind of how-tos and things like that, just questions based on what we're getting in via email from my email list. So it's just, I'm learning so much, and I'm having so much fun, and all these different industries and projects and stuff. So would love to have you over there. DelaneyFisher.com. It's a private show, but it's totally free.
Incredible.
Check it out.
Yes.
Fun time.
And you have a quotable, right, Del?
Yes. Okay. I found this one. I thought it was very relevant to today's topic. So it's anonymous. I don't know who to attribute it to, but it says, "Overthinking, the art of creating new problems out of ones that never existed in the first place." It's so fucking true.
God. Yeah.
It's so true, and it's so unfortunate because even knowing that doesn't make me stop overthinking.
I know. I mean, I hear that quote and I'm like, well, should we just stop recording for the day? Because what else are we going to say that is more succinct and more just the answer to the problem than that quotable?
Yes. It's one of those things where, sometimes in life you become aware of something and then I feel like you can improve upon it. Yeah. I feel like the more aware I become of my overthinking, the more it leads to overthinking about my overthinking. It's overthinkception. I don't know. It fucking sucks. But throughout the years, I've definitely developed a lot of exercises for myself that help me pull myself out of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But I thought it would be interesting to just start off with kind of what is overthinking? Mm-hmm. This is from an article from Omaha, a mental health website. And it says overthinking is a term used to describe repetitive, unproductive contemplation. So the thoughts, of course, can be about a variety of subjects. And it's, research has traditionally distinguished between rumination, which is about the past and present, and anxiety, which is about the future. So no matter what kind of terminology we're using, it's referring to just persistent thought loops that don't really seem to have an end.
Right. Yeah. Oh, oh, overthinking. We're so close. We are BFFs.
Yes.
Do you find that there's a particular either time in your life or area of your life where overthinking seems to happen the most?
I think for me, it overwhelmingly it's about my professional life and career and
Okay.
creative projects. I don't do a ton. I still do some overthinking personally, but I do feel like it's definitely the professional stuff outweighs my personal stuff. What about you, Kels?
Yeah, I agree. Professional stuff, definitely. And I think socially a lot for me. I've noticed that a lot of my overthinking has died down since I haven't lived in LA because
Oh, interesting.
at least in
Yeah.
comedy, there's so much socializing. Everybody talks about the hang with comedy, right? That it's not just going and doing shows. It's like you have to go hang out and socialize and network. And man, I would leave so many nights like that where I would be out hanging out with other comedians, and then the whole ride home I would be way overthinking everything I said, wondering if I was awkward or if something I said got taken the wrong way, or it just, that was a
Yeah.
lot for me because even
Yeah.
though I'm a performer for a living and we do this podcast, I am pretty introverted socially. When I'm in a large setting, I'm not the social butterfly that's like popping between all these groups. I kind of like to find one person I'm close to and just kind
Yeah.
of, I way prefer one-on-one conversations, or if it's like a group conversation, is with best friends. It's people I'm very comfortable with. And yeah,
Yeah.
that has taken a huge load off my mind to not be in those settings all the time anymore, because that's a lot for me.
That makes so much sense. It's also making me realize that I think the less social I've become throughout the years, just by default of just lifestyle changes and stuff like that, I think that's probably why it feels more off balance to me now. You know what I
Oh,
mean? Where
uh-huh.
like, okay, oh, I'm not doing stand up anymore, but you're meeting new people almost every night when you're doing that job.
Yep.
Or you're out and about meeting new people, or just, when I was younger, that's what I wanted to do more often, is just like be in a lot of social situations.
Yeah.
But I'm not really doing that anymore. So that's probably why I don't feel like I overthink so much socially or personally, because I've actually opting out of a lot of those situations.
Yes.
And now
Yes.
the focus is, it's more like, well, I know I work from home, I hang out from home, I do things from home. I go out still sometimes, but so much of it is just based on, my own environment that I've created for myself. So I think it's just naturally remove some of those things, but I still think they would be there if I was in those settings regularly.
Yeah. I think with overthinking, you have to have your own set of tools for how to manage it, because the solution isn't, I can't speak for everybody, but more often than not, it's not going to be that you go live by yourself in the woods in the middle of nowhere and you don't have a job and you don't ever see anybody. It's like we are all still going to have to be in situations where overthinking can
Right.
crop up. So that's when you have to, find what works best for you to move through that.
Absolutely. Although it does sound nice going in the middle of nowhere, living in
Listen, I'm in the
living
cabin
somewhere
right now.
in a tiny house.
I'm at the cabin right now, and I've definitely been living that life. I tell you, it's pretty nice.
Right. That's what my brain goes, where I'm like, wow, that would be ideal. But I know that once I was there, I'd be overthinking about that.
Yep.
And all the things that I probably should be involved in that I'm not, because now I live in the middle of nowhere, in a tiny little house.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to note on this article. It says research suggests that 73% of 25 to 35-year-olds overthink. I'm very interested to see what the percentage would be after somebody hits 35, unless that was just like who they, surveyed, or whatever their research, that's the demographic their research was about. But I'm wondering how this changes as we age. We'd have to probably get an expert on who can tell us if there's any differences. And they also said that women have a tendency to overthink more than men. based on these studies, which is a whole other situation.
Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense because, we're kind of taught to not trust ourselves as much or as quickly, I think. But yeah, and then basically overthinking, if you're curious, like, why does the human brain even do this? What's the point? It keeps us alive, right? If you're problem solving, it's a survival mechanism. However, people who have experienced, certain traumas definitely overthink a lot more and become more hyper vigilant. So overthinking has definitely been related to anxiety, trauma, depression. So if it really is like getting in the way of you feeling like you have control or you can manage your day-to-day life, definitely seek a professional who can help you with all of that. But yeah, so it's just really fascinating, just the science behind why our brains do this, because it's like we don't need a lot of this anymore. Can we just get rid of this with our next evolution as human beings? I'm done with this shit.
Yeah. I'm sure there's also a really huge correlation between overthinking and perfectionism, because I think a lot of my overthinking stems from a place of just trying to make sure everything is perfect, which of course is not attainable, but it's like it's protection, it's survival, it's trying to make sure that whatever I'm doing is going to result in the best outcome, and it's exhausting.
Absolutely. Kels, is there like an example that pops up for you where you feel like something that you really overthought that was causing you a lot of stress, whether it was recent or in the past, anything like that pops up?
Yeah, so professionally, and I know I mentioned this a little bit, but anytime I have to do something that is a bigger deal or more pressure than my day-to-day work as a comic, that overthinking really kicks into gear. And I have learned, especially this year, that it's actually doing me a disservice. I used to look at overthinking as like, this is how you protect yourself from failure. And I learned this year that some of it, especially if you're overdoing it, it backfires. So I mentioned that when I did the Tonight Show this year, it was the second time doing it. I had really overthought it my first time, just so much anxiety leading into it. And then this time I really got in my head about if I was going to like go blank on stage. I became kind of fixated on this fear of like, what if you get up there and go blank? And what that did is it made me stop trusting myself. It made me feel like I had to over prepare in this crazy way of like running the set a million times and all this stuff. And what that ultimately did is it got me way out of my element, because that's not how I am for a normal show. And I know I know doing the Tonight Show is not doing a normal set at night, but what my therapist had helped me understand is like I was giving myself this constant messaging of, I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I don't trust you. I don't trust you. You're going to make a mistake unless you do this a million times. And that was a shitty lesson to learn. I mean, everything with the Tonight Show still went great, but I was exhausted. I didn't feel like myself going into the taping. I had absolutely run myself into the ground. And I don't want things in my future to feel like that. I don't want the next big opportunity I get to be something I dread, because I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to make myself sick getting ready for this. I don't want to live like that. So it was a hard lesson to learn, but that was something I've learned I need to work on with myself, is really trusting that I do know what I'm doing and that overthinking did not serve me. It totally backfired in that sense. So that to me is like a pretty big one of recent times.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting to like think of that through a different lens. Is like, do we have an overthinking problem or do we have like a trust problem? You know, where it's like when you trust yourself, if you trust yourself, look, I trust myself that I'm going to figure it out as it comes. Look at all the things that I've gotten through before. I trust that I'm resourceful. I trust that I'm going to act with integrity, all of that. But when you have that grounded trust in yourself, you can often become unshakable with external stuff. You know, of course, shit happens, but if you know that you're going to do the best, the best that you can with what you're given at that time and all of that, it does really help with that anxiety. So it's really
Yeah.
interesting how like self-trust can be an antidote to like some of those overthinking spirals, you know?
Totally.
Even thinking, okay, I'm gonna take you down a very, very scary little thought loop of my own.
Okay, yeah, because I was about to ask, what's the recent one for you?
Here's what happened to me when we talked about this episode. And here's the thing, I was like, I want to do an episode about this. So you'd think I would be better prepared mentally, right? No, absolutely not. And so I thought here's kind of the order things kind of went in. At first I thought, okay, I'm going to think of every situation I've ever overthought in my life. Wait a minute. That doesn't work. That's too many situations. Okay, Delaney, no. Just pick your top thing from your personal life, your professional life, and maybe your health. And maybe we'll do 3 examples. Okay, wait, I can only think of 1 example. That's not going to work. Maybe not the top 3. Okay, let's just do whatever comes to mind. Okay, now nothing's coming to mind. This is going to be weird. And then it's like, oh, wait, I wonder if we've done a topic about this before. You know what? I should really ask Humira if we've done a topic about this, because we'll need to make sure we have different titles about overthinking. Okay, now we go into, wait a minute.
No.
I haven't written any bullet points down at all. So now I can't have no bullet points, because if I show up with nothing, then I black out and I don't say shit on the podcast. Okay, so we knew at least 3. Let's do at least 3 bullet points. Okay, now there's too much pressure on just the top 3 bullet points for the episode. Okay, that's just, that is just that's a little sneak peek at my brain every day. So when I thought about, let's sit down and talk about overthinking, it was too much, because this is kind of my default. Yeah. And so that was very telling of like, wow, I'm even overthinking about an episode about overthinking. And so what I had to literally do was say, okay, why don't you just talk about the fact that you overthought about this episode, because at least you can go a little deeper into that versus going kind of wide and surfacey with a lot of other things that are on your mind.
Yeah.
So I had to literally pinpoint it to the most recent situation, because there was just too much. I was being flooded and overloaded.
Wow. How are you not asleep by 2 p.m. every day?
Oh, that's why I can only work a few hours a day, because my brain is so done. And it's not that I obviously you don't want to be thinking like that. Like that's not what I'm wanting to happen, but that's what I have to sift through with pretty much every decision and most moments of my day. And it's not like I'm pacing around my house in absolute chaos. It's just there. Like I could look totally calm to somebody in my presence, but in my head, that is what's going on.
Yeah, it's like people who are functioning alcoholics. You're like a functioning overthinker.
Yes. And I've even overthought about like, what is going on in my brain? You know, Cam doesn't seem to have these same kind of thought loops. Like, is this anxiety? Is this trauma? Is it both? Is it ADHD? Is it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Am I hypervigilant because of things from my past? Even that exhausts me, because in this day and age, I feel like you can get a lot of diagnoses for all kinds of things. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, is any of this right? You know, or like, is nothing right? So I don't know, guys, but that's just honestly how my brain functions. And there's certain things where I can be very present and it's not happening. But if I'm on my own deciding something or preparing something, it's
Can I ask,
in there.
And you don't have to answer if you're not comfortable, but have you talked about this in therapy?
Yeah. And, you know, different things, trauma, anxiety, whether it's nature versus nurture or a mixture of both. Nobody really has any definitive things. It's more just like what tools seem to help you. And I know for today, we had a scheduled podcast recording. So my brain is like, you have to figure this out because you have an appointment, basically. So just whatever you decide, that's what you're going with. But when I don't have a real deadline or appointment, I usually just overthink myself into inaction, and then I don't do anything.
Oh.
Okay. Or I do some kind of version of it later or something. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's just the reality. So how does any of that resonate with how you operate, or like what was your thought process today for today's episode? I'm so curious. Like, how did you prepare?
Yeah, so my brain kind of thought of a few different categories. So at first I was like,
Yeah.
um, what how does overthinking come up for me in different parts of my life? So like we talked about
Yeah.
professionally, it's something that pops up for both of us. But I also thought about how I deal with overthinking in my relationship too, and how Chad and I have, we are just in such a great place with communication where we know that we both have times where we overthink things, where one of us will say something that the other person will go, "Oh, huh. I wonder if when they said that, did that mean that or did that mean that?" Or, because we all come into relationships with our own set of insecurities, of trauma, of past memories. And so he and I think sometimes our default is to try to just figure it out on our own without talking about it with the other and just kind of trying to like let it go or work through it. And what we've found is the most helpful is that we just ask the other person. And it's like,
Yeah.
that seems like such a duh thing, but that's really taken a lot of communication with each other and a lot of trust that, like, hey, I know what I'm about to ask might sound really silly to you, but when you said this, did you mean this or did you mean this? And then it's like you just talk about it, and then all of a sudden that overthinking process is done.
Right.
And it's so
Right.
great. And it's funny because I feel like he and I are strong communicators on the, spectrum of whatever good communication is. And even
Yeah.
for us, sometimes it's like it can take a lot to just go, hey, can I talk to you about this? Because sometimes you're like, oh, I just want to have a simple day. Like, I don't want to get into a whole big conversation. But I've learned that for us, that's the best way to handle things, is to not try to like sit and ruminate on something. It's like, just talk about it, just
Right.
ask. And we always figure it out. So that was something I was like, oh yeah, I overthink in relationships. I overthink in friendships. I overthink with family things. I think anytime you
Yeah.
have a close relationship in your life, there are so many times where you're like, oh shit, I wonder if they took what I said the wrong way, or like, you just have to be able to
Right.
communicate.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you feel
Yeah,
like
that makes a lot of sense.
you have that in your relationships too?
I feel like I do sometimes, but it's definitely for some reason very prevalent in my professional life. Like it
Mm-hmm.
really is. And whether it's, the way that I grew up and the perfectionism and kind of overachieving mentality or whatever it is, that seems to be very prominent. I feel like in my personal life, I can, like what you said, Kels, like if
Mm-hmm.
you ask the other person or you talk about it, it's not that same kind of overthinking. I don't
Right.
know. Like I can relieve that a lot easier in my personal stuff
Yeah.
than my business stuff for some reason. But yeah, I mean, I understand the roots of the cause and, just different environments growing up and stuff like that. And but it's weird. It's like the same thing. Even if you uncover why you might be that way, when you feel like you have to be a little bit more hyper vigilant or something, it doesn't just disappear. Now you have to
Right.
just work with, I know this thing, but now how do I remind myself that I'm in a different environment now as an adult? I don't have to be as hyper vigilant, or
Right.
whatever. Like it's so strange that your brain and body can be reacting in similar ways to what it used to, but it doesn't need that anymore.
Yeah. I completely agree. I will say too, when you were talking about how there are different age groups that struggle with overthinking, maybe more so than
Yeah.
others. So for me, being on the birth control I was on for whatever that was, 12, 13 years for most of my 20s. Actually, I'm sorry, for all of my 20s. And it was like a little bit of the late teens, a little bit of early 30s.
Yeah.
That created so much extra anxiety for me. I was overthinking everything. And I would be
Yeah.
so curious to know what my thought process would have been during those years if I wasn't on the pill. I mean, I'm sure there's still, I know
Mm.
I'm a bit of an anxious person anyway, But God, I could not believe once I got off the pill how much my overthinking slowed down. Like things just come to a conclusion in my mind so much more easily now, rather than like
Yeah.
a constant ruminating of it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm just interested to know how it's going to be in like our 40s, 50s, all of that. You know, I talk to people who are older and it's like, yeah, I just naturally give less shits now. I just naturally
Yeah.
don't overthink about the same things. And maybe having kids did that for somebody, or just, you know, getting older did that, or, you know, certain grief or loss people have experienced. But yeah, I'm just really interesting to see how like this will evolve in both of us based on where we're at now. Cause yeah, I can look back in my 20s and I definitely felt like I ruminated more about my social life and personal relationships than I did like career stuff. And now it's like very opposite. So
Yeah.
weird. So
Yeah.
weird.
And you mentioned overthinking in preparation for this podcast. I overthink so much while we're
Yeah.
recording the podcasts, where
Right.
everything that's coming out of my mouth, even as I'm talking right now, I'm like
Yes.
in my head trying to make sure that I'm conveying correctly. They look at me like I'm like having trouble even
Right.
talking as I'm trying to explain this, but it's just like it is hard. Public speaking is hard. I do it for a living and it's
Yeah.
hard because it's like we know that you listeners can listen to anything. I mean, you can turn our podcast off at any second and just be like, "Oh, this is like I'm not interested in this episode,"
Right.
or maybe they're not getting to the point fast enough. Like I'm always in my head thinking, "Okay, are we
Yep.
giving our listeners a good show?" And I try to be as personal as I can on the show, but also in the time we've been doing the podcast, I've become way more mindful of like what I actually want to share on the show
Yeah.
because our show got so much bigger over time
Yeah.
than when we started. So when we started, it was like, felt like we forgot that we were recording. Like we were just
Yes.
the three of
Yes.
us having conversations as best friends. And then you get older and the show's gotten bigger and I'm very aware of like, what do I want to share of my personal life? Even if I
Yeah.
think there are great things that maybe could be super helpful to other people to hear that I've gone through. Like, you guys know I didn't even open up about what was going on with my mom for like 2 years because
Right.
that's such a personal, private thing. I so overthought that. I so overthought, like, do I want to let strangers into my world in this way? So there's constant overthinking when we record.
Constant. I totally resonate that with that. And I'm sometimes something will come up where I'm like, God, I would love to be able to talk about this on the podcast. But in reality, I probably won't be able to talk about this until I'm like 60,
Yeah.
you know, or like if the show is still there, maybe I'll be able to bring it up then, or I would love to be able to talk about this, but I would not have somebody else's permission to talk about this. So
Right.
therefore I can't, and I have to prioritize my personal relationships and my life over bringing this to the podcast. And then it's like, well, what's a happy medium? Could we get an expert on the podcast to talk about this topic, but I'm not talking about how it
Yes.
personally relates to me because it is really important, but I'm not able to share how it relates to me at this time, you know? So it's like, oh, how do we still bring that value? But we also have to be mindful about our own mental health and the reality of our own life and relationships too. And I mean, I could only do this podcast because it is just me and you recording right now. I mean, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if we were able to see all the people that actually tune into the episodes, I would shut down. I have terrible stage fright. I wouldn't be able to share as freely as I do.
Yeah.
But my mind definitely has to be tricked into being as vulnerable as I am on the show.
Yeah.
You even saw like when we did live shows, those handful of live shows, I definitely froze more. I definitely felt it, you know,
Yeah.
and it's constant overthinking. It really
Yeah. Yeah. It does help to talk about it. Like
yeah.
every now and then on the podcast to be like, this is, it's more of a feeling of stage fright than I had ever experienced before in the podcast. But it's just trying to make sure that like I'm sharing the things I want, that I feel proud of the episodes we put out, but that I also am protecting my my personal life and my loved ones that, like you said,
Right.
it's not their choice to have their lives talked about on here. So I'm just really,
Right.
you know, just think about that stuff. But
Yeah. Yeah.
should we get
Um,
into some tips of the things we do when we find ourselves overthinking to help get us out of it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, based off what you just said, Kels, this isn't on my list, but it just came up.
Yeah.
Being in your head about like, I want to make sure that people feel engaged with what we're talking, like all that kind of stuff, right? My rule of thumb now is just kind of like, if I feel engaged and I'm excited and I'm into it, that's kind of all I have control over,
Yeah.
when it comes to podcasting and things like that, or just any kind of creative thing or project that I make was I engaged and into it at that time, then that's really that's my compass now, because
Yeah.
really you just can't please everybody about everything. But yeah, anyway, I got lots of tips on my list, but what's one of your top ones?
So I want to start my tips with talking about the 4 agreements, which actually got brought up in a recent episode as well. And it's something we've done a full episode on, but I think it's one of those great kind of touchstones to come back to because it's so applicable for so many different topics. But I think the 4 agreements can help me stop an overthinking process in its tracks. So just a reminder what the 4 agreements are. It's number 1, be impeccable with your word. Speak with integrity, say only what you mean, all of that stuff. So it's like, if you are saying what you actually feel is your truth, it's like, well, then it's hard to overthink it because you said what you were
Yeah.
supposed to say, right?
Yep.
Number 2, don't take anything personally. Ooh,
So hard.
so hard. That one is so hard for me. Nothing others do is because of you. What others say and do as a result of their own dream or perception of their rules. We all make rules about how things should be, but I'm trying to paraphrase
Yeah.
because there's a little paragraph that comes with each one. And if you don't know, by the way, the 4 agreements is a book that's very popular and is a way of living that a lot of people have taken on now. But so that's number 2. Number 3, don't make assumptions. That's another one I really struggle with. I assume a lot of the time when I'm in a process of overthinking that it's like worst case scenario. Like whatever I'm thinking is happening, which is my fear, that's what I'm assuming is happening. And it very rarely is the actual case.
Right.
And then number 4, always do your best. Man, that one has stayed with me so much since we first talked about the 4 agreements. It's like, if you really are always doing your best, you can't beat yourself up.
Right.
And that was something probably one of the very top things I struggled with, especially in my 20s, was like, I would look at something I did the previous day, the previous week, the previous month, and be like, God, why did you make that mistake? Why did you do that? You could have done that better. And it's like, but that version of you couldn't have, because she was doing her best. So when I think of life like that now, oh man, I have such a better relationship with myself and past versions of myself. It's like, you did the best you could do at that time. So
Yeah.
it's just a reminder, those 4 agreements I think help a lot with processes of beating yourself up and all that.
Oh man. You've never brought up how like the 4 agreements are helpful with overthinking. And it's so interesting to hear it from that perspective, because every single one is so helpful for this exact
right?
thing. Yeah. Just like living your life by those 4 agreements will naturally kind of help with probably the overthinking spirals. Those are really good. So good. I feel like a lot of mine are kind of around certain logistics or action steps or things that I do when I catch myself in one of those. One is that thinking of something as one of many. So for example, overthinking about today's podcast episode, I'm like, this is just one of many more podcast episodes we're going to be able to record. We're going to do this indefinitely, right? This could be years and years more worth more shows and all that stuff. And so I like to tell myself, look, if there's something that I didn't get to talk about today, or if I thought that I messed up on, or I thought was important, just bring it up on another episode. in the future. Or in a few months say, hey, Kels, can we do another overthinking episode and let's do it from this angle instead, right? Like, even if we never do that, it really relieves me in my own brain to say that is an option. You can just let this go now. So one of many things is great. So whether you're, whether you're a teacher, it's like, this is just one of many classes I'm going to have throughout my career. I'll do things differently next year. Or you're a real estate agent. This is one of many homes I'm going to show to somebody. Just taking the pressure off that one isolated thing. This is something I've talked about several times on the podcast before that my therapist brought up. I'm sure a lot of people have different versions of this. I don't know who to attribute the exact thing to, but the whole worry appointment thing, where you catch yourself thinking about something, worrying about something, and you say, wait a minute, make a worry appointment in your calendar. Maybe it's once a day at 3 p.m. or every Thursday at 1 p.m., whatever. And you have a worry appointment in your calendar. And that's when you can sit down and worry about everything as much as you want. And so when you catch yourself like, wait, I actually have penciled this worrying in for tomorrow. Let me just do it then. But what's cool, it's a little bit of a mind fuck that when you get to your worry appointment scheduled time, a lot of times you don't really need it. So just having that option of like, oh, I can think about this later because I'm not gonna forget to worry about this. Don't worry, I won't forget. That's super helpful.
Oh, great tip.
Gosh, such a good one. I use it all the time. Business, personal life, everything. Also just keeping in mind that people don't care. They do not care the way that you care about your own shit because everybody's living in their own heads. So the thing that you're ruminating over there is not even on their fucking radar because they got their own jobs and life and family and shit that they're going through. They don't care that you used purple instead of blue on the font on your email, right? Like they don't give a fuck. And so kind of like, people don't care as much as you do. Such a helpful reminder. My gosh.
That one. That's like a write it on your bathroom mirror one for me in terms of how often I need to be reminded of that. It's like they're not thinking about you.
Yeah.
They're not worried about whatever you're worried about.
How great is that? That people are not thinking about you all the time. Right? Like what a relief. What a fucking relief.
Well, and just to pick, especially if there's like a particular person, like say there's like a boss figure in your life, right? In your work situation, somebody that you feel like, oh man, maybe you're overthinking something you said to them. It's like picture them and what they might be overthinking about. And then you realize like there ain't room for you in there. Because everybody is worried about their own shit.
Yes. Have you ever been in a situation where you were overthinking about something and then you actually ended up in a situation where you are on the other end of it? So like for example, let's say, I've sent an email that I've overthought to shit, whether it was like, I should have said this differently or done this differently, right? Let's say that I was maybe, sending in an email after sending in like a job, like a resume or job application or something, right? And overthought the little email or follow-up email or whatever. And then being on the other end of somebody who actually hires people now, when I get that email, I don't think twice about it. Oh, that's a nice email. They wrote about that. Cool. I appreciate the thought. I'm not looking at every fucking word about, oh, this could have been said better and this could
God, yes.
So helpful to be on that both ends.
Yes, I do that with Tommy, my opener, who's been on the podcast, amazing comedian. I used to overthink so many things when I was on the road with Jim Norton, and because I think there's just naturally that fear when there's somebody who is employing you. You are like trying to make sure you do everything right and all of that. And so, and Jim and I are friends and Tommy and I are friends. And I have always tried to reassure Tommy if there's ever a time where because he and I will be open with each other. If he's like, I'm feeling anxious about this thing, I'm like, don't feel anxious about this. Like, I'm not worried about it. I'm not even thinking about it. Like, this is nothing. But I try to always do whatever I can to help him avoid those feelings, because I remembered, oh my God, hating feeling so anxious about anything like that.
Yes, yes. Another one that really helps me too is just like zooming out, right? We talked about like thinking about yourself at 95 years old. Are you really going to be super stoked that you worried about this thing for 3 days that you're worrying about right now, right? Like if you can
Dude,
let it go
yes,
as
that's
your
on my list.
95-year-old, yeah, if you can let it go as your 95-year-old self, then you can let it go today because it does, this little minute thing does not matter in the grand scheme of things. So helpful to just give yourself like that, force that perspective on you.
Oh man. Yeah, that's what one of my tips right now is will this matter in 1 week? Will this matter in 1 month? Will this matter in 1 year? And just like
Yes.
do that until you can feel that it does not matter.
Yes. And oh my gosh, that quote that you brought up on one of our last episodes, Kels, that your grandma would say, like, don't sweat the small stuff and it's all small stuff.
Yeah.
I love it. I think about it
I
all
love
the
that you
time now.
love it.
Yeah. And
Oh.
it's such a good one for overthinking. Like, really, it's
Yeah.
all small stuff
It's all
in the
small
grand
stuff.
scheme of things, right?
Yeah.
You're alive, right? You're like, I mean, okay, you're going to figure things
Yeah.
out. You're resourceful. Another thing that I do, let's say that I'm really ruminating about work stuff, I will just make sure that I do less work that week or that day where it's a smaller chunk of my time. So let's say that, for some reason I'm working on a project and I'm really in my head about it. I will just make sure I'm balancing out my life with other things. So I'm going to make sure I see a friend that week for dinner, or, you know what I mean? Where I'm like, okay, if I just make sure my personal life is taking up more of my pie chart or whatever than my business life, that helps because it reminds me this is just a very small part of who I am. It's not the whole fucking pie. That helps. Like, okay, is something off balance that you got to rebalance in your day to day or your month or year or whatever.
Yeah. God, that's a good one. One of
Yeah.
my other top tips, this actually came from my therapist that I saw when I lived in LA. She was so fantastic. Absolutely loved her. And I think that this piece of advice came up after I'd done the Tonight Show for the first time. God, the Tonight Show. It's just always just so many emotions that go with it. But I remember the first time I did it, I made the mistake of like reading like a ton of YouTube comments on the video. And there were like so many amazing ones, but any negative ones, I took it as like that is the truth of my performance and my comedy and all this stuff. And like I don't know, I think back then that was what 6 years ago. It's been a long time since I did it the first time. I think 6 years ago.
Yeah.
And I God, I didn't understand the concept of trolls really yet. Like I didn't understand that there are so many people in this world who are so deeply unhappy and will go out of their way to say horrible things just to make themselves feel better.
Right.
Or to try to bring other people down with them. Like I just had a really hard time understanding that. I still have a hard time understanding it because I mean, you will never ever catch me being a troll on somebody's page. I mean, that is so wild to me that people leave public mean comments. It's crazy to me. But I just had a hard time going like that is not the truth. I think I felt like, well, if somebody can feel that way, then isn't that true? And it's just like, no. So her advice to me was, well, how about you let yourself really go down that line of thought? Why don't you let yourself like try to be your own harshest critic and like actually believe what this person's saying or what you're thinking of yourself? Like really go like, oh, I'm a terrible comic, and see what happens. And it's so funny because when I let myself actually go there and be fully horrible and negative to myself, all of a sudden I came to my own defense. There was another voice in my brain that was like, no, you're not. Like, what are you talking about? No. But it took going there to find the other part of me to stand up to that negative voice in my head that was coming from the trolls. And so
Yes.
sometimes it's like, it was kind of reverse psychology, I guess. It's like, let yourself go there and just see what happens. And
Oh, love it.
yeah, that was a really powerful exercise for me. That really turned things around.
I love it. I am such a huge fan of thinking about the worst case scenario. I
Yeah.
really am because for me, and it sounds like that, yeah, going as deep and dark as you can. I think you realize like, oh, like no matter what, I'm going to be okay. That's the conclusion I get to anyway. I'm
Hmm.
like, okay, if this all went away, what would I do? Like thinking about really what I would do. Okay, I'd probably move to this place and I would rebuild my life, or I would, quit this thing and start this.
Yeah.
I just start thinking about all of the options or things that I do have if everything went away, and it makes me realize like I would be devastated, but I would be okay. I would survive. So
Yeah.
if I know that I'd be okay no matter what, can I bring the being okay no matter what into like the present moment and be okay now, right? It's like it makes you realize that worst case scenario, you still are resourceful enough to think about what you might do next.
Yeah. Exactly.
But I love that, like coming into your own defense. Yeah, just be as shitty as to yourself as possible and see what happens. Like see how yeah, you realize how ridiculous you're being, how mean you're being to yourself.
Yeah, ridiculous is a great word for it. It was like, this is ridiculous. This is
Yeah.
silly. So yeah.
Yes. I also like to think about the overthinking I've done in the past and like the result of that or what happened. And I don't know why like Instagram comes up as an example, but being on like social media, and I remember like overthinking what color I wanted each highlight bubble to be, and like the brand colors I
Yeah.
wanted on my Instagram and what I wanted my bio to be, overthinking about that all the time, changing things, whatever. And it's like I don't even have Instagram anymore. All that thought and overthinking I did about something that isn't even around in my life anymore, I can never get that time back.
Yeah.
So what am I doing now that's going to be like my future Instagram account? What's like not going to really be
Oh,
here? What's
yeah.
not going to really matter that I'm thinking about in a year, 3 years, 5 years?
Yeah. Oh, I'm so envious that you don't have social media. The amount of
That was real
time.
bad for my overthinking. That was really bad for me.
Oh, it's so funny that I haven't even said anything about social media until this point in the episode. But yeah, I mean that is certainly the number one source of my overthinking on a day-to-day basis is social media,
Yeah.
1000%. I mean, there's nothing that even touches it. I think it's such
Right.
a big part
Right.
of my life that's why it didn't even come up as a like, what do I overthink about? It's like that is a built-in part of my brain now, is that I'm just
Yeah.
always overthinking what I'm posting on social media.
Yeah. Yes. I feel yeah. And I don't know how you are able to cope with that day to day, Kels. I really don't. Like, I think anybody who is on it and is doing it in a way where they can keep doing it, it's like that takes so much mental gymnastics. Every day, every post, every comment you might accidentally see. That is such an overwhelming experience in itself, I also like to think about, okay, what can I control versus what I can't? If I'm in an overthinking spiral, like for
Mm-hmm.
example, it's like, think of an example that's going, okay, so right now my lit agent is pitching like book ideas and oracle deck ideas and all these concepts and stuff that I've had. And I could either overthink about that of like what if, or what if it doesn't, or whatever. But what I can control is if I really like a concept enough, I will make it no matter what, right? Like if
Yeah.
it doesn't get picked up or whatever, I'm just going to make the book. I'm just going to write the book. I'm just going
Yeah.
to write the audio book. I'm going to do it anyway. So
Yeah.
there's really nothing to lose because I've already decided that I have control. And what would that look like? And then I will allow myself to actually look into that process. What does self-publishing an audiobook look like? What does this thing look like? And I will allow myself to see all the other avenues. And then there's no overthinking to be done because I've made my mind up that if I really care about something, I'm just going to do it no matter what, you know?
1000%. And I will say that I used that line of thought a lot with my special coming out because my agents first pitched it to the networks. And I knew that the backup plan was like, if a network doesn't buy it, we're putting it on YouTube, which nowadays it's like, honestly, it's not even a backup. It's like a great other option. But
Yeah.
we still, I think, as comics especially, but just anybody, it's like there's that shiny kind of star-studded idea of like a network bought it, right? And you're getting like this big fancy paycheck and you're going to be on the billboards and all this stuff. It's like there's still part of you that wants that. And when you are told no, like when it's like, hey, we're not going to buy this, it feels like a rejection. And so I had done that whole thing though, like you said, where I was trying to not put too much energy into if the networks were going to buy it or not. I knew that what was in my control was that if it doesn't get bought, I'm going to put it on YouTube. And I will say that my special has had so much success on YouTube that it has taught me this huge lesson of like, what you think you want might not even be the best. It's like, we don't always know, right? Like sometimes the thing that's just like, you're doing what you can control is actually like a great thing. You know, don't be afraid of what that is, because I've been blown away. I mean, it's at 1.6 million views and it's been out for like 3 months. I would have never, like, I could not have predicted what was going to happen on there. And I feel so grateful that it's had the reception it's had.
Yes, exactly. Love that quote, like rejection is redirection.
Yes.
And it's like we have these preconceived notions that, oh, this would be the best possible scenario for this thing, but we tend to block out all the other potential scenarios for it. And when I really think about my career, all the things that I've been able to do in my own way or have some creative control over have been the things that have worked. The stuff that the stuff that I had to go a traditional route, I didn't enjoy very much. There was a lot of rules I had to follow that I didn't agree with. Like, I can look at all those things to the point where I'm like, part of me hopes that I don't have to do a traditional thing at any point ever again, right? Like, I'm open to it, but I also know what comes along with some of those routes too. And I love that. Such a great example, Kels, is like, there's more than one way to get somewhere. And if you've made up your mind that you're going to fucking do it because you feel the driving force to do it, then nobody can take that from you. You're going to make it happen.
Yeah. And believe in yourself. If you believe that what you're about to put out there is worth it. Cause I got I don't know if I told you this, Del, but I got a nice piece of validation that I didn't expect. I didn't know that I would get to hear something like this, but you know, after the special had been out for a couple months, my agent had called the networks, the television networks that had passed on it, and was like, just kind of like hey, just wanted to let you know that Kelsey's special is at, you know, I think at the time he called, it was like 1.5 million views or something like that. He's like, just want to let you know, like, hey, her special ended up doing really well on YouTube, so like, you know, next time there's something you really might want to consider this. And one of the television networks apparently told him that he was like, yeah, we fucked up. And that's like, what a validating feeling that like the thing that I was giving so much power to, you know, these big shiny networks were like, oh man, it'd be so cool. And then to kind of get that rejection, feel a little bummed about it, but have the special do so well on its own. And then to have those places that I put so much power in admit to my agent, like, yeah, we fucked up. We should have bought it. Man, what a validating feeling. What a good reminder to just like, if you've got something you believe in, put it out there and it will find a way. Like, even if it's not the way you thought or the way you hoped, it will still find a way.
Oh my God, exactly. I think about even the fact that Self-Helpless exists is because we all got rejected for something else first together.
Yes.
Like, we made something together that was being pitched and all this stuff and whatever. And, you know, things weren't kind of biting or whatever. So we decided to make Self-Helpless wouldn't exist without being rejected for something. And then this became such a huge part and such a positive part of our lives. It's like I think you mentioned something, and it's like, you know, you cannot give your power away to other people. You have to keep your power. If
Yeah.
you're giving your power away to people, you're fucked.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I would have
Yeah.
been totally fine never hearing that from the network, that that's how they
Right.
felt. But it was a nice, like, kind of peek behind the curtain that
Right.
I don't know. It's just, I wanted to share that with you listeners too, that like, if you're in a position where you have felt rejected by something, just know, like,
Right.
you never know.
Exactly. Exactly. And you never know like what they have to keep in mind about what they're saying
Oh,
yes to or no
yeah.
to. Like you have no idea what their guidelines are from their supervisors
Oh,
and all that kind
yeah.
of stuff. Like it's just you have to you got to stop letting things like that make it what you're like making them mean about you or your project or your thing. Like don't take it personal.
I listened.
What is it?
I
What
looked
are
down
the
at my
four-
phone. I was like, "Don't take it personally." I was looking at the 4 agreements. Yeah, it's like, listen.
Exactly.
Sometimes you're gonna get rejected for something because you're not ready for it. Like that. Truly,
Yeah.
that is a reality. I think you have to take some of the 4 agreements with a grain of salt. Like, I have
Right.
not gotten some opportunities in my life because I was not ready for them. But
Right.
like you said, I think there are a lot of times where, like with networks, it's like sometimes they don't have the budget or they've got another project they're working on. It's like there are a lot of things that really you shouldn't take personally.
Right.
But yeah. Anyway.
Exactly. Also a big fan of potentially batching things that could help you stop some overthinking loops. Like what I mean by that, let's say that you you write a blog or something, and every time you sit down and just write one blog post, you get trapped in an overthinking spiral. But instead, if you say I'm going to write 3 blog posts in one sitting, I'm going to give myself 45 minutes to do so. Sometimes that can help you overthink each piece or help you stop overthinking each piece. And your new goal becomes, I'm going to write 3 pieces in 45 minutes or something. So batching certain things can help. I know for me, I can batch certain tasks, but I cannot batch others. Like when Kelsey and I record a podcast, we record one podcast that day. We don't record a bazillion things.
Right.
However, if I'm like, maybe giving editing notes to podcasts, I can do several of those in a day, and that helps, you know, it's easy. But so I think that can be a tool for people as well, especially with perfectionism. And then another thing that has helped me is just taking a fucking break from whatever that thing is that you're overthinking. I remember, I'm pretty sure before I left social media and all that stuff, I took a trip with Cam to see his family, where they have like a cabin in the middle of nowhere. It's really nice. Like you don't get much reception. You really have to shut off. And leading up to that, I had been overthinking about like something with social media, right? What my fucking bio should say and all that kind of stuff. And taking like a week away from that, I gained clarity of like, oh, I don't actually even want to be on it. That's the actual root of the problem.
Yeah.
It's not that I got to change my fucking bio. It's actually, I don't want to be on it.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't have gained that clarity if I hadn't been able to really step away and give myself some space from it. So sometimes just a break, if you can't feel, you're not coming to like a resolution, you still feel uneasy about something.
Yeah.
Might help.
Yeah. My last tip is, when you are overthinking, ask yourself, what is the benefit of this? What is this accomplishing to be overthinking in this way? Like, what am I hoping to gain from this? Do I think I'm going to be a better person by overthinking this and overanalyzing this? Is this going to make me better at my job? I feel like so often the answer is just like, no. Like this isn't going to improve something. I think, of course, you should like make sure that you are doing what you can in your work to be the best version of yourself. But so much of what we do is unproductive spiraling. So like when I like had found out from the networks that they weren't going to pick up my special, there was that temptation to start overthinking and like kind of look at my special in a negative light and be like, man, is the special not good enough? Why did they not want it? And then I'm so glad that I stopped myself. I could feel that starting to come on, and I really stopped myself and was like, we're not going to do this. Like, we feel good about the special. We're going to stay happy about it. And I'm so glad I didn't, because then look, to get to see the other side of somebody going, oh, we fucked up by not taking it. It's like, see, that would have been such a waste in that situation to try and like beat myself up or figure out if I could have done a better job. It's like, it wasn't personal.
Right.
You know?
Exactly. Exactly. Yes, I totally agree. And then my final one as well is, Kelsey, you've talked about this a bunch on the podcast, is just a little bit of meditation every day. I know that you were like very committed to, like, you've been able to stick to that for a long time. It took me a long time to be able to actually do that and stick to it. And my God, is it so helpful.
Yeah.
Just what's going on in your body, even with just like, what is it? The parasympathetic nervous system, just like actually calming that down does reduce like the spiral, the overthinking spiral, whatever is going on in the body, everything just kind of slows down. And you start to realize that the things that maybe you were going to be overthinking about don't actually have to be tended to today or at all. It's like really an interesting, my overthinking is so much worse on days that I haven't really meditated. So I know it's a no-brainer one, but my God, if you actually do it, it's very helpful.
Oh, yeah. And I'm not perfect, God. I mean, more days than not, I don't meditate, but I feel like I do things most days that are meditative. So it's like I go on walks or I go work out or I listen to music. Like, I know that sitting down and doing a meditation obviously has different benefits than doing these things that are more of like a shortcut to it. But I do think it's like, whatever you can do, right? I think we try to emphasize on the show progress, not perfection. Like, do what you can to take care of yourself. It looks different for everybody.
Amen.
Yes. All right. We hope that was helpful. We've got an iTunes review of the episode. This is from Josh S. Rants. The best. Oh my gosh, I'm so sad. I just finished listening to your social anxiety episode and I have officially finished binging all of your episodes. I found you ladies in July after watching Taylor's Netflix special, loved, and have been obsessed ever since. You all do such a great job of picking relevant topics that are so interesting and informative and make them so entertaining to listen to. Super sad I finished binging because now I can't listen to you ladies throughout my long days. Love you all so much and I'm excited to start listening weekly. Oh, thank you.
That's so nice.
That is so
Thanks,
nice.
Josh. Yeah. Josh S. Rants.
Josh S. Thank you so much. What a kind and thoughtful review. Thank you so much for taking the time to leave that. Man.
Absolutely. And if you want 65 extra episodes to binge, if you haven't checked out the Patreon stuff that we do, we got stuff over there as well. Patreon.com/self-helpless.
Yeah.
And a lot of those are like...
Oh, sorry, I didn't interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say the episodes where we were not overthinking what we were saying, unfortunately for us, fortunately for you guys. But
yeah, we probably could have overthought a little bit more on those episodes, but they are there for you to binge if you ran out of episodes. That's super nice.
They sure
Kels, do you have any updates, segments, things that you want to share or plug?
Yeah, so I just got back from a trip to Spokane with Chad. We went and visited my family and saw some of my best friends, and it was such a great trip. You guys know that now that I live in Minnesota, I see my mom closer to like once a month now, maybe once every 6 weeks. And so when I get to see her, and of course, it's so amazing to see my dad and my stepmom and my friends as well. But of course, like I've talked about before on here, my mom has something called frontotemporal dementia. And so my trips home, when I see her, it's very precious time for me because, she tends to be a little different each time I come home now because the disease is progressive and also it just really fluctuates like on not just a day-to-day basis, but even like the time of day that I talk to her or see her. And so the first day that I went and saw her during the trip, she was pretty out of it and it didn't seem like she fully recognized me right when she saw me. Like it took her a little time. And then the second time we went and visited her during the trip, she was so excited to see me and just like we had a really amazing trip. I was playing old Beatles performances for her on my phone, and she could like,
Oh,
God, the brain is so fascinating, especially with music. She could still remember the lyrics, and so she was like kind of
wow.
singing along to it a little bit, and um, yeah, it's it's such a bittersweet thing to go visit home because I get to see her in person and hug her and have that time with her, but it really does kind of like wreck me for a little while afterward because it is so hard to see my mom like that. And
Yeah.
yeah, I miss my mom every day. The mom that I've known my whole life. It's If you have a loved one with
Right.
dementia, it's such a strange experience where like you're looking at them, but they're not there. It's like a very different version of the person that you've known.
Yeah.
And it's hard. It's really hard. So it's been over 2.5 years now since she was diagnosed, and they initially in the hospital gave her 6 weeks to live. And
Wow. So wild.
yeah, it's just it is a lot. It is really heavy and hard and heartbreaking all the time. But yeah, so it was a bittersweet trip. It's so great to see her, but just it's
Yeah.
it's hard. It's
Yeah.
emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
That.
my segment. Tell me what's going on with you. What's a
Yeah.
segment that you have?
Let's see. Nothing really comes to mind. I've been just really enjoying a lot of podcasting lately. I mean, really, just like that's just kind of something I'm doing almost daily right now. And whether it's Self-Helpless or recording the career podcast that I have, I'm also guesting on a lot of podcasts right now. A lot of like vegan and environmental type shows, which has been interesting. So if you're
Wow.
interested in like, it's been really fun. I just realized like how much I enjoy this medium and doing this. And I think in the past I've really been afraid to kind of go all in with it because I've always felt like I need several things out of fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I need a lot of different things in case something doesn't work out. I got to have a fallback plan. But I'm
Mm.
just allowing myself to really double down on it because I really enjoy it. So if you're interested in any of those, like I was on the World Vegan Travel Podcast, Vegan Posse, Plant Centered Podcast. I've just been doing a lot of podcast
Oh,
circuits, I
cool.
guess,
Yeah.
and it's just been I've just really enjoyed connecting with people I would have never met otherwise. And so, if you have if you have a podcast or if you have like an event in that space that you're curious about, me potentially being involved in or whatever, I would really love to hear from you. So, you can go to DelaneyFisher.com, send a message, and, chances are I might be able to do it. So that's
Sweet.
kind of it. And then another plug thing that I definitely overthought about is truly how much I love the show The Other Two. I don't know if you've seen it, but
Uh-uh.
it seriously one of my favorite shows that have been on in so long. I laugh out loud every single episode. The writing is excellent. The acting, the casting, everything is so great. And I even overthought about should I share this or not because there is like seems to be some controversy over why the show was canceled. And I'm like, oh God, does me sharing how much I love the show indirectly condone anything that may or may not be happening? I don't know. But anyway, like I'm just like, look, I even overthought mentioning one of my favorite TV shows that I enjoy.
Oh
So
man.
it's just never ending. But anyway, I just think it's such a fucking hilarious show. And
Yeah.
that's it. That's all I got.
Nice. All right. Well, we hope that you guys can relate to some of this today and that some of the tips are helpful.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm excited to see you guys on tour. KelseyCook.com for those tour date tickets. Please follow me on social media if you don't. I'm on TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, all the places. Delaney has
Yeah.
chosen a much more peaceful path. and I'm jealous, but I gotta keep my comedy.
There's always a downside to that too.
Gotta keep my comedy promo train rolling. So come follow me online if you haven't, and
love it. Yeah, DelaneyFisher.com for Career Crush, the podcast. And thank you so much for that lovely review. If you want to leave a review for the show, it might get read on the very next episode. We'd love to have it.
Yeah. All right, guys. We love you. We hope you have a great week. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to the Self-Helpless podcast. You can find our Patreon community, merch, and our individual work at selfhelplesspodcast.com. We'd be thrilled if you shared this episode with a friend, or feel free to post it on Instagram and tag at Self-Helpless Podcast so we can repost you and say thank you.